feeder, birthing body. By being more trans-inclusive, are we erasing women?
Women are female and men are male. It's okay to say that.
Having female anatomy and being a woman are two different things.
Well, what is a woman then?
I'm a birthing parent.
Only female humans actually give birth.
Is this a valid debate, and is it going too far?
We are born biological women. We are different. We are different.
Is this a valid debate, and is it going too far?
Well, I'll wait to see how the different sides represent themselves as far as the extremes, if it's too far. But I do think what I find fascinating about this topic is that there is merit to both sides, to each side as they're presented today, in the sense of cisgendered women wanting to patrol the boundaries around the women's movement and how we do advocacy and how to organize with a unified sort of front. And there is certainly merit from individuals that identify as non-binary or trans, however, just non-binary, non-cisgendered women, to have a stake in this argument as well and to want to be included in a women's movement here in the United States.
Kara, why is this issue important to discuss?
Well, first, thanks for having me, and thanks for having the conversation. One of the frustrating things about this, I've been working on issues like this for many years now, and it's very difficult to have a conversation in the national media. So thank you so much for doing this. I do just want to say quickly, in your introduction, you said, and Susie mentioned, cisgender. So I do not call myself a cisgender woman. I am a woman because I'm an adult human female. And I think that that is a very important part of this conversation. I think it's really important that we be very clear and accurate in the language that we use. So that's why I think this is such an important conversation.
Well, I do too, and I think a lot of people are confused. And a lot of people are, in their hearts, say, I love humanity, I love people, and it matters not to me whether someone is gay or transgender or whatever, but I'm afraid if I ask a question and say something wrong, then I'm going to say, you're transphobic. You don't agree with everything I think. And that's not really been my experience. But I do think some people fear talking about it. And so I figure just charge the machine gun nest and let's just get out there and talk about it, because I think people do want to talk about this. Shandy, what do you think about this? It's good to see you again, by the way.
Good to see you too, Dr. Phil. And I'm glad that you said thank you for this conversation, because it's good that we're having the conversation. That's the only way we're going to move forward with it. I think that it's great that we're looking at these things, because I've been told that I'm not a woman because I can't have a period, I can't have babies, but there's actual women who can't do those things too. So it doesn't make them less of a woman. So opening the door to this, it's gonna be amazing. I'm ready.
Have you ever heard the terms chest feeder, birthing body?
I don't think women should ever be demeaned to something so simple as chest feeders. It's just nasty.
For me, I like to be called a woman.
When we talk about rights for women, it sometimes excludes members of the LGBTQ community, so I think it's important to have those kind of terms.
Very disrespectful.
As a woman, I don't feel like that's appropriate, and it makes me feel like people that use that term are superior to me.
As a trans woman, I think it's just really disrespectful because we all are all human.
You go to a university, you hear these types of terms.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. It doesn't bother me.
The pedestal that women are supposed to be put on is getting ripped out from under them. They are destroying the very things that they believe they're fighting for. It's dangerous to women whether they realize that or not.
Well, the question is, by being more trans-inclusive, are we erasing cisgender women, or as you were just saying, just woman, people whose gender identity matches the sex they were assigned at birth?
The way that you defined it is the way that it is ordinarily defined in society today by some, but it also assumes that there is such a thing called gender identity that we all have. That's an assumption, right? And it may turn out to be true. I don't think that it will, but it might. But it's important to at least acknowledge that we're making an assumption that gender identity is something we all have. I would say that I don't have one. I would just go back to saying I'm a woman because I'm an adult human female. I'm also a woman who cannot have babies. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that a woman who cannot have babies is a woman in a manner that it is not true that a male person could ever be a woman.
Merriam-Webster's definition of female, 2020, 1A, of relating to or being the sex that typically has the capacity to bear young or produce eggs. B, having a gender identity that is opposite of male. They took a lot of heat for that. So they have a statement they would like me to read. Like thousands of other words in the dictionary, Merriam-Webster's entry for female has been added to over the years to reflect the ways the word is used. September 2020, we published an additional definition of female, having a gender identity that is the opposite of male, to reflect significant usage of that meaning. There has been no update to the entry since then, despite recent reports otherwise. That meaning is shown across all media in millions of examples going back to 1995, including phrases like transgender female athlete. That use of female could not be understood using the existing definitions, so a new one was added. This is the regular work of a dictionary. We chronicle the language to help everyone understand all the different ways words are used. Merriam-Webster does not invent words or meanings. Instead, we constantly monitor and review evidence of a word's use and make updates and additions as needed to reflect that evidence. We hope this helps explain why some of our definitions, including female, receive additions or changes over time. I think that's a fair explanation. I think they look at it in context. Did you have a comment?
My name's Katrina.
Katrina, go ahead.
And I've been listening, and it's hard because I've always been female in my heart and soul and mind. I started transitioning when I was 7. I've always known I was a woman. And for women to be like, well, you're not. I will always fight for women's rights. I will always want to be a part of the movement. It kind of hurts to hear that it's like, well, we don't accept you. But I'm like, I accept myself. Why can't you accept me?
Women who insist on accepting the reality of biological sex are often called hurtful. It can't be hurtful to speak the truth. It just can't be. It's important that women be able to say that women are adult human females without being told that that's hurtful.
I understand
Why do you say in the same breath that you're open to this conversation when technically you're not open to this conversation because you're still speaking from the space of what the reality is? That's not being open.
I'm curious, just by a show of hands, how many of you think that the language, menstruating person, pregnant person, birthing bodies, lactating person, chest feeder, uterus-bearer, birthing people, womb carrier, how many of you look at that and say, I support the transgender community, but this is going too far, it's being too aggressive? Raise your hand. Okay, that's about 75%. How many of you say, no, that's not going too far, I get it?
Sort of.
That's about maybe 20% of you. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I think it's degrading to a point because women are so much more than all of that language and that terminology. And I understand about the inclusion, and I'm learning a lot today. Let me tell you, I'm a history teacher, high school history teacher, and I have a lot to give back now into the classroom because of this discussion. But I just think the language itself might need tweaked and changed,
Right.
but I
That's
think
all we're
it's
asking for.
evolving. And I think it's just going to take some time.
Great. I'm glad that you're learning. I'm learning. Did you have something to say?
It's good that it's being talked about, but we also, even though we're opening ourselves to have this discussion, but we also have to open our minds and our hearts in both ways.
Right.
Because it's like speaking over each other and saying, but you're not understanding this or you won't understand it because I'm going through this. Well, yes and no. obviously, because we're all going our individual paths in the way that we live our lives. But you just have to open your heart and be more accepting, you know.
What I find really interesting, though, is that we always seem to fixate, though, on the trans experience, right? Like that's how it feels for us women, biological women. That's how it feels. We're always focusing on how the trans people feel and how the non-binary people feel. We get left out of the conversation oftentimes. Susie, you can talk in a second. And it's very frustrating for us because there are unique issues that affect us in a way that you will never understand. And that's not to say that your existence is invalid. That's not to say that you're a crappy person or that we should relegate you to the back of the bus. None of that. It's to say that we live in a world that will always be different by the fact that we are born biological women. We are different. We are different. And we can embrace you. We can bring you into the fold and say, cool, there are issues that will, you know, that together we can have and that we can, you know, fight for and what have you. And I'm sure that the existence that, and I always think this to myself, I couldn't even imagine how stressful and painful it must be to be trans because you're sort of fighting against the biology that you have and yet the nature that you want to have. That has to be very challenging, and I reconcile that.
Let me
Some people
interject
it is, for
something
some
here.
people it is. But you know what's very upsetting for us is to be told that our very existence is superseded by the feelings of others. That is how we feel, and it's very, very frustrating.
I'm not in this us.
Let me interject
I'm
something
not
here.
including you
Let me
because it's pretty
interject
clear where
something
you
here.
stand on all of this.
Let me interject something here while what you said is fresh in everybody's mind. Because I have heard what you've said. You said it very eloquently, but I have heard what you have said here before, almost verbatim, with adding one word. And it was talking about white women, and it was said by a black woman. She said, you can't relate to what a black woman goes through. You're a white woman, I'm a black woman. You can't understand what I've been through because you're a white woman. You talk about the struggles that white women have been through. You don't understand struggle because you're not a black woman.
That's exactly
and you've been
the point.
Through. And so my point is that there are different perspectives and you don't have to agree.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you're not open, that you can't weigh that, and that it doesn't cause you to broaden your horizons or broaden your perspectives just because you don't change your definitions.
It's about more than definitions, though, Dr. Phil, in the sense of even recently with the Roe v. Wade stuff, there was a piece of legislation that was put before, I believe, the Senate, and people can correct me on that, that didn't once reference women, female, anything. It just said people. And it was in reference to abortion. When I saw that, I thought, this is erasing the fact that the majority of women are biologically inclined to give birth. Now, whether they do, like I said before, is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if you can actually give birth. The fact that you have that anatomy, that is what's very important, at least as far as I'm concerned. Now, when you look at the way that politicians are discussing this, it has ramifications. It affects us because they're using language that does not represent the 99.96% of the population that identifies as a biological woman.
Do you have a story or a question for me? Click the link in the description and tell me what in the world is going on.